ready to be quiet?
But
Well, it should be, yeah.
to our television person,
He's coming.
We're ready now.
my light's not on, but that, okay, hello, good evening. The hour of 6 p.m. having arrived, I call to order this regular meeting of the Municipal Services, Facilities, and Infrastructure Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and channel 1302. Video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are on the wall pockets as you enter the room. The public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I remind city councilors, do not express opinions about how you're going to vote. Ask questions, represent your constituents, but you will have an opportunity to debate the issue at the next meeting. I will not recognize another individual the second time until everyone has had a chance to vote, to speak. Anyone wishing to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room, identify yourself by name and address prior to speaking. Written comments from the public are accepted at the clerk's office until 1 p.m. Tuesday. Our minute taker is participating remotely. Committee members, be sure to turn your microphones on and remind me to do mine. If the minute taker is unable to hear, they will ask us to speak louder or turn them on. Call to order this regular meeting of the MSFI committee, and I do declare that we are all here and we have a quorum. A couple of introductory comments. For one thing, we have quite a large agenda, so hopefully we're going to move right through it. But this being the first MSFI meeting of the year, as chair, I do have a couple of things to address our committee with, and some requests to my committee people. Obviously, come to the meetings prepared. You normally all do. But if you have questions on anything, either ask the city manager, city staff, or myself, so that we can move expeditiously through the meeting. My overall goal is that every committee member is important and all will have input. No one will be pushed to the side, marginalized, or somehow silenced. Very, very important to me. Overall, we are the liaisons with the public. We listen to the public. We talk amongst ourselves at the meeting. We communicate to the city manager what's going on out there. It's extremely important. The goal overall is to make sure everyone is heard. Over the next several meetings, we will be inviting different departments through the city manager to come to our meetings to inform the public about what they do. This committee deals with the functions of the city. Finance deals with the money. PLD, planning, deals with the ordinances and such. We deal with the real city services. We deal with fire, police, public works, water, sewer, library, just about all the things that actually affect the public. We just had the capital improvements program this past Saturday. We heard a lot of information, but that was primarily to the city council. It's very important that the public know what's going on and where their tax dollars are going and why we're doing what we're doing. We have 7 items on our agenda this evening. When we get to conversation about the Main Street project, I've got some items to speak about. Item number 1 on our agenda, we have a communication from Councilor Remy regarding the enforcement of winter parking ban. If you would come forward, introduce yourself to, I'm sure everyone knows you, but.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Remy, I'm one of the at-large counselors for Keene. So I submitted this letter just to really start the conversation around what should we do here. Having myself gotten tickets for leaving my car overnight on a 50-degree night in November. I shouldn't say that. I've obviously follow all the rules and I remember to move my car all the time. But sometimes when we have those winter parking bans, they start on a fixed date. And as we look through, we didn't have snow at the time. When I wrote this letter on December 9th, it made a ton of sense because there was no snow and it hadn't snowed yet. And as we were still banning parking on Main Street. So I wanted to start the conversation around, does this process still make sense for how we determine it, fixed date? To some of the conversations I've had, this could also apply to, summer parking bans or even the patio permits that we have, and how are those managed associated with, we're having warmer weather further into the year every year. So how do we think about how do we manage that in the right way? My suggestion through this was, at least for the winter parking ban, to think about whether it's a winter advisory or a winter warning, and using it to those events that are, released by the government or released by weather services, to determine when it's banned or when it's not, as opposed to just a blanket ban all winter. Just a suggestion, but this is really meant to open the conversation and to really think about what could we do in this space that's a little more convenient for the public.
Good. Committee questions? Any questions from the public or other counselors? Yeah. Where is he? Duncan Watson would be the city staff person involved with this.
Duncan Watson, Assistant Public Works Director. I'm not certainly prepared to comment on this tonight. What I would suggest is that it get referred back to Public Works to research this idea and maybe present some ideas that might work. And, I'm not saying I'm supportive of it. I'm not saying I'm not supportive of it, but I think we would want some time to look into it.
Perfect answer. Thank you. Very good. And as that thought is being worked on through the city manager, through staff, there's also a summer parking, an all-year parking ban overnight on Main Street. And I've often wondered why. So just because it was doesn't mean it has to be. I think it maybe would be worth giving some thought. So, Counselor, a motion, please, if you have the motion sheet.
Move to recommend to the city manager for further review and consideration with a report back to the committee.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor and also seconded by Counselor Kat Workman. Anything further from the committee or public? Seeing none, all in favor? We are unanimous. Thank you. And item 2, again, a little more parking information and street information. We have a PowerPoint presentation regarding winter operations.
Good evening, Harry McKelvey. I'm the Transportation and Stormwater Operations Manager.
Good evening. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm not sure how I'm going to see this. They're supposed to cue it from the other room.
Maybe.
Maybe. Oh, there we
Councilor
go.
Remy, can you
All
go
right,
run
so,
up? Can you go
winter
run up the
operations,
hall? Or,
2023-24, this is basically an overview.
excuse me, we're not on
Okay.
here. I love technology. It's possible we won't see it. Paper? Thompson. Oh, we don't have any paper. Yeah, that would be a good idea. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves for a few moments. Perhaps the mayor can tell a few jokes.
Stand-up comedy in the job.
It's in the job description.
Riveting.
Is there
Keeping your
anyone that
pin
could,
drop.
that could assist if they don't know what to do?
Jesse to the rescue.
If all else fails, code enforcement. Uh,
Yeah, usually there's something.
hmm?
Is there no signal or something?
Are the other screens working?
they
The
can see it.
TVs are, but I don't think these are.
We'll just have to go sit
Maybe
in the
to-
audience.
To move it along, if one of them was tipped this way, so.
Yeah. We did that one, will be the one that's all people to see, right?
Mayor, Your Honor, Mayor, Jay? Jay, could you turn that TV around so those of us that, is that whole? Okay, we're good. We got that one. Can you all see?
I could see from it.
The hard part is just sharing for everybody's information. That laptop is what's hitched up to normally share through these TVs, and that's not how they're sharing tonight, so that's where they're having trouble getting it to show up on the rest of the screen.
All right, we've solved it. We're moving.
That works.
That works. Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead.
Let me continue then. So, can we go to page 2, please? There we go. So some of the topics I'd like to cover, including materials, coordination with the community, weather forecasting, data collection, and how we do police department coordination for our winter ops. Next page. Next page. All right, winter operations include salting, sanding, plowing, and picking. And we deal with 123 miles of roadway, 52.8 miles of sidewalks, 6 parking lots, and many metered parking spaces. Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Thank you. This is a GIS map of our plow routes, and basically what I wanted to present with this is that we assign different trucks, represents these numbers, to do plow routes. So if 65 has his route, 22 has his route, 12 has their routes. If something happens to the truck driver or truck 6, then somebody's gonna have to go into where truck 6 is to operate, and this gives us our street lists as well. Next slide, please.
Is your microphone on?
I believe it is.
Okay, all right.
Do I need to touch the
It
button to
looks
talk?
red, yeah.
Do I? Okay, that might help. So the next sheet is the plow route. For example, if we give the plow route to another driver, then, they have at least a list to follow to go do the plow route. There's many times we have truck drivers that know many plow routes, so that we don't have to do this for every time. Next slide, please. The highway division has 25 full-time employees, 3 foremen, 5 maintenance aides, which are laborers. Oh, I see. All right, thank you. 5 maintenance aides, which is the laborers, 1 operations manager, which is myself. The motor equipment operators, there's 3 of those. Those are the front-end loaders and the backhoes. The maintenance aide, 2, is the downtown person. We have 12 motor equipment operators, which are the truck drivers, the CDL level people, and I have a sign maker as well. Next slide, please. The equipment, we have many trucks. We have 1-tons, 6-wheelers, 10-wheelers. Some of the other equipment we use are skid steers, front-end loaders, and we have 5 sidewalk plows of different makes and models. Next slide, please. The assignments, I just give you a general idea. We assign people to the sidewalk plows. There's salt routes and truck routes. You'll see combination of people, but one of the things I wanted to show you about this is we borrow sometimes water treatment facility laborers or water sewer laborers or some other divisions give us drivers when we get into some of the operations. We don't necessarily have a full staff right now, so we borrow from other places. Next slide, please. Again, here's just an idea of the routes for the priority sidewalks, which we take care of first and then then move out into the general areas, you know, to mostly accommodate the schools. Next slide, please. All right, our parking lots and garages include Gilboa East, Gilboa West, Commercial Street, City Hall, Wells Street, and Elm Street. Next slide, please. Yep. Meter parking spaces include, you know, Mechanic Street, Elm Street, Roxbury Street, Washington Street, Gilboa Avenue, Mechanic Street, Summer Street, Winter Street, Center, Railroad, Emerald Street, and Ralston Street. And these are places that normally, after our normal winter options, getting the streets opened up and the main sidewalks, we then go and pick the metered parking spaces so people can, you know, make it to the meters and get out of their cars to get on the sidewalks. Next one, please. Salt is purchased through a contract with Concord, New Hampshire that negotiated with Morton Salt. When we order salt, it's delivered by truck from Portsmouth, New Hampshire through a trucking company. And the salt shed is located at 560 Main Street. And right now, this year, our rate for salt is $82.39 per ton. Next, please. Magic is a treatment that we do for salt. It's a liquid mixture sprayed on the salt. It contains magnesium chloride. Its freezing point is much lower than just straight salt at -30. It sticks to the roadways and surfaces and provides ice melting in colder temperatures. And there's some other ingredients. I think there's like a brewer's yeast or something like that that they use to actually helps it stick to the roadways. It's awesome stuff. Next slide, please. Our community coordination include, you know, we provide salt in coordination with these other community people, including the Keene School District, the Keene Housing Authority, Keene State College, and Dartmouth Hitchcock. Next slide, please. You know, as everyone knows, you know, everything that Public Works Highway does is based, you know, there's something to do with weather. Either we're building something or treating something or reacting to. Weather forecasting is a big part of what we do. We have right now a weather forecasting application that we use for, web-based. We also have it on our phones, and we also use other places, you know, whether it's MUR Weather or the radio station. We try and make a forecast each time based on the information that we have so that we can better treat the storms. It's pretty high-tech, I think. You know, we use, you know, we kind of get together and make an assumption on what we think our best shots are. As it is, it's weather forecasting, it's not perfection. Next slide, please. And then our stored tracking data, we use a cartograph, and we try and track. For example, you see this one says winter storm 2/25 of 22. So we know that how much labor we got into it, how much equipment we've used, how much material we've used, and then we try and debrief from these storms to see if we can improve our, you know, the way we did things, you know, whether it was freezing rain or snow or we had to plow, or, you know, we try and figure out those things, and we keep, you know, this stuff for history, you know, historical tracking as well. Next slide, please. All right, so our snow plowing and salting process, our process is unique in New Hampshire. The way we get triggered for our storms, we don't have somebody in the office or driving around Keene all night. we use the police department to trigger our call-ins. You know, when they have patrol officers out in the road, they see it starting to snow, or they witness a slick road or a situation where they think it's time to get in, the dispatch reaches out to our person on call, and then we've already kind of made a executable plan on the storm already, and then this will just kick it in. So that saves us from having to man someone, you know, overnight, for example. And next slide, please. Questions?
Committee questions? Yes, ma'am. Sure.
I want to start by saying thank you to you and your crew. It can't be easy, and you guys do a fantastic job.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions about the salt. One, how much do we use per year? And is there a more sustainable solution between the salt and the magic?
Well, as far as I know, there's, the other option is there's like a liquid that we put down. We used to have that system. I don't know how effective it was. I wasn't here for that part of it, but I know we did use, it's called a brine. And, it still was basically salt water or some mixture of salt and some other chemicals in the water that we put out. And it helped the roads from icing and snow from building up. I believe that, in this environment of New Hampshire, that, public safety, in line, that salt and magic is probably our best choice at this point. I know that they've tried something, I think up in Berlin or something, they have thermal street that they're doing, which would be, an awesome thing. I can't imagine it would be, a way to do it. I can't imagine a way to do it, but that would be neat if you could. I think that historically, let's see, I'm trying to think now, I think we use about 3,000 tons a year of salt, and magic is just a treatment of the salt that we do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Question. A couple of constituents wanted me to ask you, as far as what triggers the plows going out, and I know if it's slippery, you go out and salt, but is there like so many inches of snow that'll hit the road before you drop a plow?
Well, it depends, and we're not actually measuring the amount. We are experiencing, we usually have salted, and we've seen how it's building up and reacting to that salt. We may, we have quite the different environments in Keene too. We have the hillsides, we have the downtown, Main Street, for example, has a higher use than like Greenbrier Road. So, there's different, because of the traffic, makes the salt work better too. So, that's a tough question, because when we realize that there's side roads that need plowing, we put the plows out. It's not really based on how much snow we have. It's what we think the conditions are going to be, and what we need to do to keep the roads open and safe as we can.
Thank you.
Having plowed myself parking lots, but it is exhausting.
It is.
And it's difficult, and I try to wave to all the plow guys whenever possible, because not only are they doing a difficult job, but they have to do it carefully and politically sensitive, so as not to pile snow in someone's driveway unnecessarily. How do you work the shifts, the hours with the guys?
Well, it depends. So each plow route can take 6 to 8 hours, depending on the plow route, depending on the conditions, right? And that's one pass. So, that's why we try and treat the storm with salt as well. For example, I think 2 years ago, we had a Christmas storm, which wasn't even a plowable storm, but it was freezing rain. And those guys worked Christmas like 27 hours, right? They did not go home. They did their routes and came back in, and whether they could rest until they had to go back out and treat again, or, we feed them, we do all kinds of things to keep them operational. We do have, like I said, salt routes versus plowing. And, we may divide the guys up or send them home for a couple hours and just have guys spot plowing or salting. It depends on what it is. These guys this is what they do. They are, as professional, and licensed CDL drivers, they all try and do the best they can. And it's not, sometimes they're exhausted, they're there too long. But we try and rest them in between, routes, and if someone has trouble or something like that, we'll replace them.
Good. Well, as a comment to my fellow counselors, contact the city manager and ask, can you ride along, just to get a little glimpse of how difficult and how dedicated the guys are. Not for 6 hours necessarily, but it's just crazy. Very, very difficult, and I definitely appreciate it, and I know that they do the best they can with
Thank you.
difficult.
They
Laura.
do.
Counselor.
Thank you. And thank you so much for all of your hard work. I know that this season, at least from my perspective, seems to be a lighter year. One of the questions I have is just how the coordination between plowing streets and sidewalks works so that sidewalks are not being blocked. And I'm gonna,
Well,
can I throw in a part two?
Sure.
One other question is about where snow is piled and how that's decided and what any type of barriers, blind spots that might create.
well, I'm sure it does create, snow when we pile it up, does create, conflicts with pedestrian walks and, roads versus sidewalks. West Street's a great example. There is no grass belt for the sidewalk to put on. If we go to the property side, we're on private property, for example, and that, we may have to come and pick that as soon as possible. We try and, minimize our conflicts, but, when you get into the parking areas like downtown here, you'll see big piles of snow in one corner of 5 or 6 spaces, for example. And we try and, get those spaces open during the storm event, and then at night or the next day, we'll come and pick that out of there to minimize those conflicts.
Kind of following on something where Council Tobin is going. We had this concept of spirit of place,
Yeah.
meaning individuals take a bit of ownership in the city and actually pitch in. I would challenge the other downtown property owners to get a shovel and clear the sidewalks in front of their buildings to assist Public Works. And in the residential areas, same thing. If there's a pile of snow, don't wait for the city to do it. Clear the fire hydrants. This is how it's done in other cities.
Right?
But we're very generous that Public Works does these things.
There are people I know that do like the hydrants in front of their houses or things like that, and some people do assist us, and we work with everyone that we can. We appreciate it also.
It's our city. Good. Any public comments or questions?
Yes.
Oh, come on up. Name and address for the minutes.
My name is John Barczewski from 6 Birch Street. I'm a transplant from another state, and in the city that I'm from, that's exactly how they had us clear sidewalks. You have a sidewalk in front of your house, or if a business has a sidewalk in front of their business, they were the ones responsible for clearing the sidewalks. And I would think that that would cut down on the cost for the city and reduce the property taxes.
Oh, no. Thank you for that very progressive idea. Thank you. Anything else from the public? Okay, motion, please.
I move to recommend that the PowerPoint presentation, winter operations, be accepted as informational.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Anything from the committee, public? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing, and
Thank you.
thank the guys and ladies, if there are. The crew. Okay, item 3, we have another presentation. This is regarding neighborhood parking program. Our community development team is coming up. Ooh, we have computers. What happened?
Is the way it was showing the PowerPoint?
Okay. Oh, but his does. Ah. Yes, sir.
Good evening, councilors. Jesse Rounds, Community Development. I'm just here to do a quick introduction for our consultant, but I just wanted to explain the program briefly. So the neighborhood parking project grew out of a suggestion that came from the housing needs assessment that we did last year. One of the suggestions was to look at parking as a tool to help with increasing density, particularly in the downtown neighborhoods. So this is an Invest NH funded program, 100% funded by the state through their Invest NH program. And it's really a study. We're looking at various options and looking at a couple neighborhoods to try and figure out if there are options to change how we look at parking in the neighborhoods. The idea is that if we can change things in the short term for residents now, that's great. If we can change things in the long term to increase density, to increase the number of housing opportunities downtown, that's also great. Not to steal your thunder, Greg, but we did find that a lot of the solutions that are out there may not be workable right now, but they may be workable in the future. So we wanted to present these, and we're really in the information gathering phase right now. So this is our chance to hear from you, take that back, and then hopefully, not hopefully, we will be back to give you a presentation in the future. And with that, I'll hand it over to Greg.
Thank you, Jesse. So I'm Greg Strangeways from Walker Consultants, working with the city on this neighborhood parking project. Thank you, councilors, for taking some time to learn more about this. Jesse mentioned some of this. The project was grant funded and came out of a housing needs assessment. So the study area is not downtown itself. It is a separate downtown project, but these are neighborhoods kind of adjacent to downtown. You can see on the map there. And these are areas where the zoning already allows more density than exists today. The city has seen some interest from developers in building housing. I mean, these aren't going to be giant housing projects. But parking was identified in that housing. Sorry about that.
Okay. So these are areas where there already could be more density than there is today, and the housing needs assessment identified parking as a barrier to building housing in a couple of different ways. So one is just providing all of the parking off street, can take a lot of money and can take a lot of land. So some developments don't pencil out, never get built. Or if housing does get built, it's fewer units than you might otherwise have. So the idea is, could some of that parking supply be moved on street to reduce the requirement to build off street? And then in some ways, maybe the first two agenda items were a perfect setup for this. This winter parking ban was also identified as a barrier. If the street parking is part of the supply, but you can't use it 6 months of the year overnight, then it's just not going to be as useful to people. So we are already starting to look at what some of your peer cities do around New England, and that can also inform what you might want to do with that winter parking ban. But as you've heard, perhaps there's a way to move that to just when there's a snow emergency. And then while we're looking at this issue of on-street parking, these are just some related topics that we're also doing research on and are going to be part of the recommendations. Some of these were in the original city plan for this project. Some of it came from our work around New England, around the country, and we thought we could fit it in still within the budget supplied by the grant. So part of it, one thing there, the first topic is just what is the parking supply needed? What are the projections of growth in these areas? How much parking supply would actually be needed over the next 5 or 10 years? If there is going to be on-street parking added, would that mean that some streets that are two-way have to become one-way? We obviously want to think about that, the impacts from a traffic network perspective, and make sure people can still move around. Ops and enforcement. So, again, what does this look like? What are some of your peer cities doing? If there's going to need to be more permit program, perhaps even, paid parking in areas where there isn't today, how much staffing does that take? And again, making sure that this is all sustainable, financially. Again, the snow clearing, we certainly want to be alleviating problems here and not creating problems. There's trade-offs to everything, but nevertheless, we hear all this about winter operations and want to make sure that can proceed so that no matter what, if there's cars on street, they need to get off the street when the snow comes. On the demand side, this matters too. There's probably not going to be a lot of households maybe that can live completely without a car in Keene. But if there are other options for people to get around, maybe households can have, one less car than they might otherwise. So we're just looking at that demand side and anything that could be done there. So that's the ped bike transit item. We have visited at night. We will, again, just looking at lighting also. So if there's areas where lighting could be improved, and that can help either people park a little further away, or like this time of year, it gets dark early, it's a short day. So even if we do want people to use alternatives to driving and parking, lighting can be a factor. EV charging, so not a lot of the vehicles on the road are EVs today, but I'm sure, as you know, that's projected to increase. Cities mostly in this first wave have tried to put chargers in off-street lots and garages, but more and more there is better technology and ways to even do that on street. New York City has a big program starting now. So we want to look at what that could look like as you get a blueprint here for the future. The zoning and policy, I know you've made some recent changes about parking requirements, but again, we want to just, think about that as we're doing this and again, look at what some of your peers are doing. And then we also want to look at, funding options for this and make sure whether this is funded from user fees, from parking fees, whether as developers want to go build something, maybe they can contribute. If there is state and federal grant funding or formula funding, we want to look at all that. I think the whole thing, by the way, will only be about 10 minutes, but you can interrupt me anytime if you want. This is the timeline. We do have to be done by June 30th for this grant, so we are really just getting started. We did some field work already, which we'll talk about a little bit more. As Jesse mentioned, we're really in this kind of listening, learning phase now. And then we will come back, and we expect to have some draft recommendations to get some feedback on by April. For outreach, so again, sort of 2 big rounds. We're kind of going to be talking to people all the way through. But right now, again, we had an open house earlier today at Heberden Hall, the library there. And we'll do another one of those in April when we have recommendations. Same here. So kind of 2 big rounds of it. We did already complete one of these flash vote surveys, which we hadn't used that tool before, but we did get over 300 responses. We are talking with all kinds of stakeholders, people who are building housing, people, in businesses and people in the community. We do have a technical advisory committee, which is city staff, so that's police and fire and public works and others. Again, to make sure that all the perspectives are considered. This project is up on the city website, and there's, we got, some good turnout at the open house, so there's been other, outreach through mailings and social media. One thing so far we found is that not a lot of people need overnight on-street parking currently, but for, as we heard, I think in the first item with Councilor Remy, for the people who do need it, the winter ban can be really inconvenient. But I think the fact that there's not a ton of cars out there today helps in a couple of ways. That you're not trying to address an immediate parking crunch and need to do something quickly because of that. And also then if you switch to a snow emergency type system for the winter, there's not a lot of cars that need to be moved off street. So maybe they can fit in municipal lots or garages. We'll be taking a look at that. But I think it does help that a lot of this change can happen as you're redoing a roadway anyway, or as a private development comes along. So you can phase this in over a number of years. We did just want to start looking at how much on-street parking could be created. In some of your streets, as you know, there's kind of informal on-street parking where vehicles are half on the grass, half on the road. If it's going to be formalized, we wanted to start thinking about how much parking could be created. So we do, 20-foot width is probably the minimum really to have a one-way travel lane that's 12 feet and an 8-foot parking lane. We also need to account for some of this is in your code, 30 feet from intersections, 20 feet from a crosswalk. The setback from driveways isn't specified, but you want to make sure people can get in and out and think about sight lines and for safety and everything. So these are concepts. These aren't actual streets, but we are starting to test these concepts with actual streets. We may not be able to diagram every single street, but we do want to get an idea of, what's feasible. And in some cases, again, you may want to do this. We're trying not to make sure we're not moving light poles or trees and protecting that landscape area, but you may want to do some of these things as you're redoing the roadway anyway, including the sidewalk. So this diagram is for a 20-foot street, which could have then one-way traffic and on-street parking on one side. With 25-foot width, and there are at least some in that range there, that extra 5 feet doesn't really give you enough for another parking lane or travel lane. Could be a bike lane, if that makes sense as part of a network you're building out, or that could be additional sidewalk or landscaped area. And then when we get up to 28 feet, we have more options. There could be two-way traffic plus parking on one side. Could be one-way traffic with parking on both sides. So, for the wider street, there's more options there. And again, as part of this, looking at what other cities do and ideas from city staff and others, sometimes politically, if there is going to be more paid parking than there was before, whether that's through permits or people paying by the hour, by the day. Parking benefit districts, the idea there is some or all of the revenue collected goes back to that same area so that people don't feel like it's kind of going into a black hole, and for improvements, to the streetscape. Residential permit program, again, if you're going to have more on-street parking, you probably want to have something so that residents can use it. So if there is time limits or fees, maybe the residents don't have to abide by those so that they can use the parking right near their house. Those type of programs are getting easier for everyone, more online applications. People can scan their documents, and easier for the residents or employees. It could also be employees of businesses in some cases. Easier for city staff where people don't have to come in person. In addition, in many places, you don't need a sticker or hang tag or placard anymore. It's just your license plate is the credential. I should mention here that New Hampshire is really an outlier. There's a state law. So we work around the country again, and the whole parking industry has moved to license plate being the credential. And it was just Maine and New Hampshire that really restricted that. And even Maine now, it's becoming widespread. But I should mention that the law in New Hampshire, if restricting the use of automated license plate recognition, is due to sunset automatically January 2027. So things take time to implement anyway, and hopefully that can be a part of the future enforcement. And that's it. So any questions?
Committee questions? Yes.
Thank you. You'd mentioned the inventory in terms of automobiles, and I am curious if that has been explored in terms of, say, 10 years from now, what do 15-year-olds who will then be 25, is there any difference in the projection in the need of parking inventory of what it would be?
Yeah, it's a great question. We, again, we do a lot of our own research and kind of look at what others are doing about all this. So I think it's, autonomous vehicles, it's the increase in Uber and Lyft, which I don't think you have a lot of here at all, but could come. It is, trends in people getting their driver's license and using cars or other options. What we find, I guess, overall is that I think there's been some hype around parking demand going down over time, and that we really don't see that jobs and population continue to grow, so that in most places you're going to need at least the parking inventory you have now. It might grow slower, than it would otherwise. Also, there's almost always parking supply coming out of the system, so that it's, either to turn into a housing development or whatever it is, or a garage that's reached the end of its life. So that generally you don't usually have to worry about the problem of having too much parking, if that was kind of the thrust of what you're getting at.
Basically, I think when I talk to younger people, just anecdotally, I had heard that realtors had suggested people wanting 2-car garages, and when I mentioned this to several people who were under the age of 30, they laughed. And so I was just curious how that actually factors into measuring what's needed in 10, 20 years from now. So.
Yep, and I think to some degree we see that, yes, people say that in their 20s, but then when they have children and families, they wind up, driving and getting cars because they need to carry all the stuff around. But you're right. I think overall, parking demand will probably grow slower than we've seen it maybe in the past decades. But and certainly there are some cases of overbuilding parking. So it's some, but overall, most places will need the parking inventory they have now. They just might have it grow more slowly.
Thank you. Other committee? Any public questions?
Yeah, Stephen Bragdon, 51 Railroad Street. We're next on the agenda, and I'm sure this study could be very helpful to our issues. I'd just like to see a little more emphasis on the safety of the parking spaces. For your benefit, we were in a few weeks ago because we want to extend the distance from our driveway, which gets a lot of use, so that we can see when we get out of the driveway. So I'm not sure that a one rule fits all is the right process as to how many feet from a driveway. I think what's more important is what's safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public question? Yep.
John Barczewski, 6 Birch Street. It's not a question, it's a comment. Again, the state I'm from, there might be 1 or 2 weeks during the entire winter when the police department declares a parking ban on the streets. Not 6 months. I was unaware of the fact that Keene has a 6-month parking ban. In any case, it seems to me that you would only need to have parking bans when the weather's going to be inclement, or maybe a road race or something. The police could then issue a parking ban in certain streets or the entire town for weather when the snow plows are either going to be plowing snow or salting. Anyone violating the parking ban can be towed, ticketed, increasing the revenue for the city so that they can drop the property taxes on the homeowners.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we're going to be hearing more from city staff on the winter ban and summer on-street parking in downtown. Anything else from public, committee? Yes, please, motion.
Move to recommend the PowerPoint presentation, neighborhood parking program be accepted as informational.
Second.
Motion's been made, second by Council Workman. Anything further from the public or committee? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda, item 4, as previously advertised. Steve Bragdon, safety issues associated with 82 Court Street. And there is a staff response coming forth. Mr. Bragdon, would you like to address your communication, or?
No, I don't think I have anything more to say.
Okay.
Thank you. Brevity, great. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucier, City Engineer. Bear with me a moment while I plug in my device here. So I know there's a couple of new members for this committee, so I'm going to begin with a little bit of a recap of the last time we were here, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. This was up for discussion in front of MSFI a couple months ago, and at the time, my boss, Court, reminded you about the similar request that had come in earlier in '23 related to parking on Washington Street. And the result of that discussion was Public Works came up with a set of guidelines where we were going to delineate individual parking stalls for on-street parking. And it was looking at factors like the volume of traffic on the roadway, the uses of adjoining land use. We recommended that they be delineated where there's predominantly commercial, institutional uses, or a mix of residential and commercial uses rather than just residential neighborhoods. So we had that set of policies, but a lot of this discussion stems out of something the consultant Greg alluded to a little while ago. Our code discusses the parking prohibitions, general parking prohibitions related to certain things, certain general conditions. So you can't park within 30 feet of an intersection. You can't park within 20 feet of a crosswalk or 15 feet of a hydrant. When it comes to driveways, what the code says is you can't park, and I quote, in front of or close to a public or private driveway if it inhibits the use of the driveway, which is clear as mud, right? And that lends itself to some interpretation, obviously. When we developed our set of guidelines for delineating individual parking stalls, what we used as a reasonable metric was 5 feet. 5 feet setback from the edge of the driveway to the first parking stall as a minimum. And then given the amount of curb line between two adjacent driveways, divide by 20, and depending on how many spaces you can fit, you might end up with more than 5 feet, or you might end up with as little as 5 feet, but not less, right? That was our recommendation. And that was based largely on a kind of an informal survey we did of other communities' rules. The communities in New Hampshire that we found that had specific distances to set back were between 2 and 5 feet was the range. And we think that the 5 foot is a pretty reasonable measure. So last time we were here, we showed you graphics that had options at either 5 feet or 30 feet, which is what was requested. Yeah, I am, okay. So let me zoom out here, okay. And the committee asked me to come back with some alternatives, some sort of compromise position. So tonight I've got the similar graphics, but we're going to show you the differences for also 10 and 20 feet and what that would look like. So this is just a picture of Court Street, and each of these labels, I know you probably can't read it, but each label is calling out the different lengths of curb line and how many spaces. So within the area that fits our criteria for delineating individual parking stalls, which is basically from some Central Square up to School Street. Within that area, we would delineate 70 individual stalls with a 5-foot setback. If we look at an alternative with 10 feet, that number goes down to 63 spaces. Again, you're setting back further, obviously fewer cars are going to fit into each of one of those spaces. At 20 feet, that reduces to 55 spaces. And then at 30 feet, it's 45 spaces. And just, sort of out of curiosity, I also looked at, well, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't take credit for his work. One of my guys, Will Dardunas, looked at Washington Street for me and did the same sort of analysis. So if I zoom in. So this chart shows for Court Street and Washington Street what the different options would give you. They're remarkably similar between Court Street and Washington Street. The numbers are very, very similar, as you can see. But the range for Court Street is from 70 to 45 spaces, and for Washington, it's 70, get rid of you, 73 to 44. And with that, I would love to take any questions.
Committee? Well, one question, and it's not really a Public Works question. Accident history, do we have any information about that?
We didn't specifically look at accident records for this corridor. I don't know of any driveway-specific accidents, but I didn't specifically ask the PD for that data.
Okay. I have really paid attention going in and out of streets anyway, Mechanic Street and High Street and such. It's back to the same basic question of this setback from the intersection or the driveway. And my conclusion is I have to be careful that unless we want to eliminate all parking on the streets, you have to be careful when you're driving, pulling out of a driveway, pulling out of a street. My observation. And I don't think that we're prepared to eliminate parking on the streets or lose the parking. I think we'll hear more from residents and businesses if the parking is cut back. So, my observation. Yes, ma'am.
My question is in regards to, do we have any authorization or authority to, instead of changing setbacks, to implement like economy-sized cars only at the corners? And what would that look like logistically?
Wow.
I'm looking at the Assistant City Attorney, and she's looking at me. Yeah, I don't know if you can have vehicle-type specific parking prohibitions.
I don't have an answer. I would think it would fall under regular traffic control. I'm not sure if there's anything specific about like types of cars though.
As your mic is on, do you have some wisdom to share on the subject?
Nope, just to remind, I think what our city attorney had said when this came up before, there is, of course, we're going to encourage that we keep in mind what's called discretionary function immunity and how that works. That's really where we started this conversation about a policy. The way that immunity works, which is extremely important for city functions, is when you have developed a policy in an area that's left pretty open, and traffic is one of those areas that we have a lot of control and discretion in as a city department. When you establish a policy and stick to it, that's where your immunity lives. And then when you start shifting it almost every time it comes up or every time it's going to be applied so that it's not going to be consistent anymore, you start losing that immunity. So city attorney's office, that's probably our concern here.
And what I took away also when Attorney Mullins was speaking of consistency.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and to sort of reiterate that from a Public Works perspective, our recommendation is whichever option alternative the council wants to go with. We would like to kind of memorialize that decision, and maybe it's in the form of updating the ordinance or maybe it's just an amendment to that guideline that was developed back last year. We can talk about how we do that, but we do want to, set that standard and make that a uniform
Okay.
approach.
City manager, you have anything there? Okay. Yeah.
Being that we just, prior to this, heard from the neighborhood parking program, and they're gonna look at it and bring it back to us, I would think that this being part of it, we should accept this information also, but also move it into that particular PowerPoint we just heard and have the whole thing come back to us, because it's obviously gonna have an impact. And I think the request is reasonable. I'm just, like I said, I'm not sure how we do it so we can be fair and implement all of Washington Street or all of Court Street or both. But I would think we would move it into the neighborhood parking program, but that's one person's opinion.
So my only comment to that is the presentation that we heard about the neighborhood parking program is to create parking in neighborhoods that don't currently have on-street parking. So it's looking at how large the parking stall would need to be and how many spaces we might be able to create, and then what sort of system we would create. It isn't specifically looking at the city's on-street parking that already exists, although he did talk about, safety in general. So, I think there's some information we could gather, but it's not the focus of it. It's about how we create additional parking in neighborhoods that don't currently have it.
Okay. Anything from the public?
Stephen Bragdon, 51 Railroad. I think what's being missed here, or I feel that somebody that isn't hearing what we're saying, is it's dangerous. Our particular space is dangerous. There's been 2 accidents that we're aware of, plus many screeching brakes. And this desire to say everything's got to be 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, I don't think it has to be that way. I think you can make decisions based on the specific driveway. Now, it's got to be, I agree that there's got to be a criteria for it, but to just say I want to simplify this, I don't think is doing the public a service, especially if somebody gets seriously hurt coming out of our driveway or someone else who has particular complaints. I think you can treat them differently. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Let me throw this to the city attorney then. Could we, based on, as he mentioned, there has been a couple of accidents there, could we take that exclusive area and just say we are, reducing the area of parking because in that area there have been reported or confirmed accidents?
You could do a lot of things. Probably
Legally?
Yeah. Well, that probably would start getting into what we were cautioning against of making exceptions to the policy. I do hear what Attorney Bragdon is saying and what we're working at, and it makes sense, of course, to aim for safety. But again, returning to the area that this is left in the control of the departments that have expertise in handling safety and traffic. As they learn information, we can adjust our policy. Like if all streets with that specific criteria end up needing to be changed, we can adjust the policy for all streets like that. But it's when we start carving out specific areas and changing things that would be a problem.
My concern is that, okay, across the street, there's a funeral home. Further up the street, there used to be a chiropractor. Maybe another attorney moving in there that has a bustling business. So unless we determine that somehow an office of so many square feet with so many patrons, wow. And what I'm catching is that the city makes a rule and then it isn't fully universal. It puts us in the line of liability for not providing whatever amenity that business feels it needs.
I think, I hear what you're saying. I think not so much universal citywide. There's, and Public Works could speak on this a little bit more about how it's applied, but there's definitely nuance there. They do look at more criteria than just that it's a street.
Yeah.
So
if we accept this conversation as informational, we can come back again and revisit it. Yes. It's not a one-time, if it's voted up or down, we're done for the year. Informational, we can come back with additional thoughts.
Yeah.
An important difference. Yes.
Just one, sorry, just one quick comment. I really appreciate the number of people who've commented on the safety, because I actually live right around that area, and it's highly residential, so honestly, there's a lot of foot traffic. So I can imagine that even if there were, even if that area were protected or parking were banned in some way, it would increase foot traffic, and it actually could present a problem. When I cross the street in that area, I use the cars for shelter because it, so just food for thought there.
Anything from the public or committee? Motion, council? This is your first motion as a city councilor?
This is my first motion. Move to recommend to accept the communication as informational.
Second.
Motion's been made, second by Council Filio. Anything from the public, committee? All in favor? Yeah, we are unanimous. Thank you. Okay, moving along. Next item is regarding the downtown project. You may have heard about this. Spent a little time last year and the year before, and just a little introduction comment from myself. I have been invited to sit in on the pre-MSFI meetings with the city staff, just so I could be better prepared in terms of what's coming at us. The whole goal of this project is to get it done. And we had a lot of issues due to maybe untimely communication last year. It is my hope that City Council and the public will be communicating to myself or to the city manager ahead of the consultants. So we're not working against any kind of proposal, but we're all working together. This is a cooperative project, really, and there's been just so much angst over this thing, and I feel for the city staff that has survived it and the city councilors. It's been tough, but this is a big reset. We're coming in open minds, really, really positive. We've had some conversation that there might be the possibility of a second MSFI meeting during a month, perhaps piggyback to the PLD committee, as it used to be years ago, so that then we could do our regular business and focus on the downtown project. But again, the bottom line of all this, and I'll say it again when my communication comes up, is we need input from the council and from the public so that we all work together. This evening, I don't anticipate there won't be any decisions. This is just a presentation of the timeline and the basic plan of how we're moving forward. So just to allay maybe some of the public's concerns, nothing that's been discussed in the past is going to be thrown out or changed. This is just the beginning of the new start for the project. And at that, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucio, City Engineer, and that is a wonderful tee-up for my update. So, tonight my goal is really just to give you kind of an oral update and let you know what's been happening in the background and what you can expect over the next few months. So right now, our consultant is working pretty feverishly on a grant application that we're preparing for the project. That's going to be a grant that's submitted to the U.S. Department of Transportation. It's called the RAISE program, Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. That grant is due on the 28th of February, and there's quite a bit to it. As part of that, they're looking at environmental concerns that they need to document, whether that be threatened and endangered species, things like wildlife habitat and archaeological resources and architectural resources. And the federal NEPA, it's called National Environmental Action Policy?
National Environmental Protection Act.
Thank you, Councilor Madison. That policy has some pretty detailed requirements, and they're going through that process now of documenting what we have. They're also working on a benefit cost analysis that'll demonstrate to the federal government that this project will return more benefits to the community than it's going to cost the feds. And of course, there's an extensive narrative that goes along with it. So that's a big focus of their work right now. But at the same time, the sort of softer planning folks are also working on the actual design and what it's going to look like. So going forward over the next 3-ish months, what we see happening is a series of public design review sessions, workshops, if you will, followed up each time by a meeting with MSFI to let you know what we're talking about. So we've broken the project into sort of 3 focus areas. The first one will be Main Street and the streetscape improvements, things like, what do we want the bike lanes to look like? Where do we want sidewalk commerce to be located? How do we want to do street tree plantings and those sorts of questions? In a lot more detail than we've gotten into so far in the process. So we'll have a public workshop, show folks some alternatives, talk about different ways of doing things, get some feedback. Then we'll take that feedback from the public, kind of summarize what we heard, and present it to MSFI, saying, this is what we're looking at, this is what we heard from the public, what are your thoughts? And we'll get your feedback that way. At the end of those 3 meetings, we are looking at doing some sort of, whether it's a workshop or just a presentation to the City Council. I think that's still up for some discussion. But a sort of check-in with the full City Council after those 3 meetings, just sort of summarize the process, where we are and where we think we're going, and really, provide an opportunity if we're heading in the wrong direction for the council to tell us, right? After that, before I go any further, in your packet tonight, there is a draft workshop flyer that it's very draft. I know it's going to change. In fact, Rebecca's already made some changes to it for us to make it look more keenish. But importantly, the dates are going to change. So, understanding that this is all very, very much still up in the air, we are hoping to nail it down over the next week or so, and then we'll start advertising those dates. Okay. That process will take us through probably late April or early May, by the time we get through those 3 public meetings, 3 meetings with MSFI, and a City Council session of some sort. Then I think things will slow down a little bit for public engagement-wise. The updates at that point will probably be more like staff giving you an update on where things are. But at that point, we're hoping that the consultant will have all of the sort of the guidance and the direction and the input from the community so that they can complete the preliminary design documents. What will start at that point is the construction phasing, construction planning. We are planning to hold, right now we're budgeted for 4 separate meetings with different constituent groups, the residents and businesses in the downtown that'll be affected by the construction. Basically, what we want to find out is what can we do to make this construction project as tolerable as possible, right? It's going to be inconvenient, it's going to be noisy, dusty, and the traffic is going to be disrupted and all of those things. But there are some things that we can do to try to make life a little easier, and we want to talk through that with the community that lives and works in the area. So that'll start in May. Like I said, we've got 4 meetings budgeted for that, to meet with different groups. And the focus will be really, how to mitigate the impacts from construction. One other thing I did want to mention just quickly is, I know Councilor Greenwald submitted a letter with a number of different considerations that he wants to make sure are front of mind moving forward. What staff is going to be doing is creating, and we have created a list of those Q&As. Basically, it's a running document that we're using internally to sort of make sure that those things don't get lost or forgotten. Some of them we'll be able to answer pretty quickly. But some of them are going to be fleshed out over the next 3 months as we go through these design meetings. So, I think one of the questions was the location, the quantity of trees and planting beds. That's very much a question that we want to get public input on, and we'll be doing that through this process over the next few months. So, I guess the bottom line is there, stay tuned for more on that. But I did have one question for the chair, a clarification. In your letter, you mentioned including the slip lane at Central Square, and I'm not entirely sure which slip lane where you're talking about.
Where you can drive around the square from essentially
At the southern end of the square.
southern. Yes,
So Court Street, Bangor, head onto Washington.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for asking.
That's all I had. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Very good. You're right on. Yeah. City manager.
So, Councilor Greenwald, we did discuss today, and we'll discuss more on Friday, what the schedule might look like in terms of the MSFI updates and whether or not the dates work that currently are being held by PLD for an earlier start. That will inform this timeline, and then we'll be able to give you a more up-to-date timeline. The other thing that we discussed was how we might engage the full city council utilizing the MSFI committee and being able to hold a workshop with the council, but still have your chair chair that meeting. And so we're going to be having conversations with the mayor about that as well, and how we might be able to get some additional feedback before we get too far into the process. The other thing I wanted to mention, and as part of these technical review committees, we talk about how to engage different people at different levels during the project. And one of the things that we have heard a lot about is trees, right? So, and the Conservation Commission is very interested in trees. And so today we talked about including the Conservation Commission on what will be a walkabout in the downtown, looking at all of our trees when we get to that stage, as we're looking at trees that are going to be preserved, our high-value trees, what sort of trees are going to be replaced. And then we've also talked about, and when we get to the stage related to lighting, how we're going to be looking to engage our energy committee as well as our heritage committee and others. So, there have been commissions and committees that have been interested in being involved, and so we are looking at how to also plug them into the process as we move forward.
Great, okay. Get everyone involved before pen goes to paper so that we're not revising and changing and wasting a lot of time and money. It's great. Committee, any thoughts, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from the public that they'd like to weigh in at this moment? So I said, we're not making any changes. This is just a status report. Okay, so where are we? Council Madison.
Move to recommend to accept the update on the project as informational.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded on the report from the city engineer. Anything further from the public or committee? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Not specifically on our little motion sheet. There is a communication that I sent in that needs to be dealt with. So I'm not going to make the motion myself, but I'll ask you maybe to refer that to the city manager.
Move to recommend that we refer.
You just turned your mic off.
Thank you. Move to recommend that we refer Councilor Greenwald's letter to the city manager.
And I second.
Motion's made and seconded. Anything from the committee? I thank you for the referral, and I'm sure that you'll take it in the spirit it's written. And I urge my fellow councilors, send in similar, those are just things that I've heard. Okay, motion's made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, thank you. And we are now on another PowerPoint presentation. This is regarding the Transportation Heritage Trail, Phase 1 proposed action. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Brett Rusnock. I'm the Infrastructure Project Manager at Public Works. And with me tonight, I have Mr. David McNamara. He's the project manager with Stantec Consulting Services, who is managing the design of this project. So I'd like to give a bit of a recap of the Transportation Heritage Trail project. This is the city's grand scheme to connect the current southeastern limit of the Cheshire Rail Trail in Keene, which ends at Eastern Avenue. And the plan is to extend this to the northern limit of Route 101, over Route 101, over the historic Stone Arch Bridge, over Swansea Factory Road with a reused bridge, and eventually connecting to the existing trail network in the town of Swansea that they've improved to the town line. So the focus of tonight's presentation is for phase 1 of the Transportation Heritage Trail, and that is extending from Eastern Avenue to the northern edge of Route 101. And a bit of history on this project. In 2021, the city applied for and received a Federal Transportation Alternatives Program grant from the federal government for this work. And that grant program is specifically focused on providing alternatives to vehicle use for transportation. In 2022, the city applied for and was also successful in securing a congressionally directed spending grant, which used to be called earmarks, for the same project. So we were successful in getting both of those grant applications, and that is the majority of the budget for this project. It is a 80% federal cost share with a 20% local match. So I'd like to turn it over to Dave, and he's going to talk about the public engagement that we've done for this project, also review the design alternatives, and finally prepare and present a recommended action for the project. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Dave McNamara with Stantec. And as Brett said, I'll go through the process, the public process we've been through to date, and kind of walk through the alternatives that we've been reviewing based on that process. So we started the project back in early December. We had a local concerns or a blank slate meeting where we met with the public. We presented the project purpose and need, kind of what Brett has just presented here, talked a little bit about the overview, the process we have to follow because of the federal funds, and then broke out into some small group sessions and talked through the project, listened to the abutters and some of the other stakeholders to get feedback on their issues, their concerns. And then from there, we started to move into putting some alternatives together and starting the design process. So from that first meeting, it was a successful meeting. We had over 60 attendees there. We talked about what people were going to use the trail for, generally biking, walking for exercise were the top two options. And then the two main concerns that came out really that stood out above anything else was drainage and kind of the security and privacy of the abutting parcels along the trail corridor. So following that meeting, we started the alternatives, we started putting the design together, and we met again in early January, a couple of weeks ago, and presented alternatives on a few different elements of the project, I guess. So this was the alignments, screening, the trailhead and the crossing of Eastern Ave, and then the surface of the trail. And this is kind of, basically what I'm going to walk through is most of that presentation tonight and the feedback we got and how we were looking at, how we recommend some of those different elements. And then we'll talk a little bit about the project next steps, and happy to go to questions. How are we going down here? Oh. All right, so the project alternatives on the alignment side. We looked at 3 different locations. We looked at, as you see here, the blue would be a multi-use trail alongside Chapman Ave. The yellowish orange is the trail along the rail corridor. And then the red is utilizing Marlborough Street and kind of reconstructing Marlborough Street into a complete street to allow the trail users to use Marlborough Street and then connect back up to the trail corridor as we approach 101. So starting with the railroad corridor, what we show here are a couple of typical sections and then a little snippet of the trail below. So with some of the drainage issues out there, if anyone's been out there, it kind of acts as a bathtub right now. The water just ponds at the bottom of the trail. And that's where this top left typical section shows us bringing the trail up a little bit just to be able to create some swales on the side to allow that water to run down and get to the drainage systems that actually do exist out there, but just don't function anymore because of years and decades of just lack of maintenance and treatment out there. And then similarly, with the trail at grade, you can see a little bit of a cut to create those same swales in some different areas of the trail. So we'd use a combination of these based on the grading in order to get that water to move as it flows into the trail area. And in the plan, the green you see is really the limits of disturbance. So as we have to chase some of these slopes up to create those swales, that green area is what would be disturbed for slope work and tree clearing and whatnot. So then as we look at the Chapman Road alternative, you can see there's a lot more green there. And really what happens is for a large part of Chapman, if we were to build that multi-use trail off the side of Chapman, it's got to hang out over that existing slope. So what that's going to do is it's going to push all that slope further out, and we're going to have to clear all that the existing trees. A lot of that's on private property. So there's a lot of impacts to build that multi-use path off the edge of Chapman Ave, as you can see here. And then looking at Marlborough Street, so this is basically trying to create Marlborough Street into a complete street that would meet the city guidelines. So we'd have a bike path on either side, and then we'd have one single 5-foot sidewalk. So as opposed to the 10-foot wide multi-use trail that's proposed along the corridor. So a couple of the concerns here, you can see in the lower right, that picture, you've got this steep drop off on the left side of that, and then you've got some stone retaining walls on the right side along the private property. So to be able to fit that widening through there, we'd either push into the walls and into some of that the landscaping features on some of these properties, or we'd have to push out over that slope when we start to create similar slope impacts as we go on the other side. The other issue with Marlborough Street, as you see on the lower left, is we'd have to get up to get back onto the rail corridor to where the Pros Bridge is going to cross 101. So really the only way to do that would be to cut through an existing private property. And even that is going to be a pretty steep slope for the trail. So everywhere else is going to be 1 or 2%. We'd be 5 or 6% just to be able to get that slope to work. So it would hurt the accessibility a little bit of the trail as well as the private property impacts. So what we did is we put together a rating criteria for each of the alignment alternatives, including a no-build alternative. So what you see here is the railroad corridor alignment really rose to the top pretty clearly based on this rating criteria. It has the accessibility, it keeps people out of traffic, it minimizes the right-of-way impacts, it minimizes the clearing impacts.
Excuse me, Dave, sorry to interrupt. The screens back here aren't displaying for some reason, so if the committee's okay with it, I'd like to try to swivel that one so folks can see.
Oh, killed it.
So in this case, the railroad corridor alignment, we found to be the best alignment of the three, the most suitable for the city and to accomplish the purpose and the need of the project. Like I said, Chapman Ave, the impacts are just a lot more significant, and Marlborough Street has some constraints within the corridor and within some existing landscaping features, as well as the need to get back up to that trail at the end and make that grading work. So that was the discussion about the alignment alternatives. The next thing we looked at was screening. So what you see here is a few different precedent images for some of the different alternatives we considered. In the top left is a chain link fence with kind of those privacy slats that you've seen. This one is black. Different colors can be used. Top center and top right are just two different ways to do with landscaping, to create some screening as well as to create some buffer and some way to kind of keep people from crossing across into the properties. In the lower left and kind of the center are fences that don't really provide the privacy. They're more just kind of delineation where the properties are, where the public right-of-way ends. And then in the bottom center and the right are a stockade and a shadow box style fence, which is going to give you the privacy and the security in both cases. So again, we looked at some rating criteria and evaluated basically the 4 different build alternatives along with that no build alternative again. So what we found is the chain link with the privacy slats was the best fit we felt for the city. And largely that's from a cost and maintenance standpoint. The landscaping doesn't necessarily provide the security that the others would do. The stockade and the shadow box provide the security and the screening, but at a lot more cost and a lot higher maintenance going forward. And then the split rail and the post rail, they don't really provide that security or the screening. So that's where we ended up with that chain link with the privacy slats. So the next piece that we looked at was the trailhead and the crossing. So we've got the existing parking lot that's at the end of the Cheshire Trail now, off of Eastern Ave. We figure, based on laying it out and kind of being out there, we can probably fit about 7 or 8 cars today in that lot, the way it's configured. So we looked at a couple different ways to configure that and see if we could gain some more parking, as well as integrate that with the extension of the trail and how everything's gonna cross Eastern Ave. So the first one you see here is we create a multi-use trail essentially on the edge of Eastern Ave. We bring the existing Cheshire Trail along the back of the parking, and then we've got a one-way kind of circulation pattern through that parking lot with some angled spaces, and then you can see over on the right side the crossing of Eastern Ave. And RFB symbols on the side to help with the safety of that crossing location. So the second option basically looks at trying to pull that trail back in front of the parking, so you're not interacting with vehicles coming in and out of that parking lot. So that keeps the trail out of the interaction with the parked cars, similar crossing of Eastern Ave. The problem here is it pushes the parking closer to Eastern Ave. So you're really not able to maneuver in and out of those parking spaces without backing into Eastern Ave. So there's some concerns there about vehicles moving in and out of Eastern Ave. Option 2A is similar, except it's got angled spaces, so it does create a little bit more room. But still, it's not quite enough to get out of that Eastern Ave interaction with parked vehicles. And then finally, we looked at an option to have the crossing basically just come straight through where the existing trail ends, a little bit closer to the corner of Chapman Road. So that shrunk a little bit of parking layout and parking space. So we've got fewer spaces on this one. And our other concern here is you've got a bit of a high point as you come over that intersection. So this crossing here is you're out of the sight lines for traffic coming up Eastern Ave. So we do feel there's a little bit of an issue here just from a safety standpoint in terms of the sight lines of having the crossing at this close to the intersection. And so again, we get into our rating criteria. Alternative 1 we found to be the most beneficial in terms of it gives you the most parking. It allows better vehicle access. It keeps the vehicles out of the road. It doesn't get the pedestrians outside of the vehicle, but it does keep everything in the parking lot. So our preference was, or recommendation was alternative 1. And then the last piece that we looked at is the different trail surface alternatives. And really, it's a stone dust or a paved trail. The city has both, at various points within the trail system. Couple of the considerations, cost is one of the bigger ones. It's probably a 15 or 20% premium for the pavement over the stone dust. There's topography and drainage, there's maintenance, there's the trail use, and there's certain things you can do on the paved trail and that you can't do on the stone dust and vice versa. And then also concerns about pedestrians and ADA accessibility and whatnot. So as we looked at the two different surfaces, in this case, along the rail corridor, the trail's gonna be flat. We're not particularly concerned about erosion and issues like that with the stone dust. For the money, the stone dust just seems to be the better option at this point, to save a little bit of that over the pavement. So going forward, what we're looking to do, we're hoping to get a concurrence on our recommendations for moving forward with a proposed action on the different elements, and we'll be able to wrap up the engineering study, and that'll allow us to go into the preliminary design in the spring and summer, permitting next fall, with the intent to have a final design and bid documents around this time next year for 2025 construction, if all goes well. And then just summarizing the different elements that we had talked about. So for the trail alignment, the rail corridor was our recommendation. On the screening, the chain link fence with the slats. On the trailhead, that alternative one, which is the angled parking and the one-way circulation through the parking lot. And then for the surfacing materials was the stone dust. So we're happy to take any questions or.
Committee? I didn't realize we were going to be making decisions such as this evening. Obviously, we are.
Yeah.
So, committee and public, if you have any thoughts on these different issues, the alignment, the screening, the trailhead, and the surface materials, now is the time. So, to the committee? Yeah.
I did have one constituent call me that's in a butter that couldn't be here tonight, and I think is concerned with the screening issue. In favor of the project, but still has some concerns. I won't let it hold back from my vote tonight, but I will give the city manager the name of the individual, so any issues that person has can get hopefully rectified. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
John Barczewski, 6 Birch Street. But I also have a property on Marlboro that abuts the trail. And I'm wondering, would the chain link fence be 6 feet or 8 feet tall?
6 feet.
Did you consider 8 feet?
I think we haven't established what height that fence needs to be yet. I think generally we try to provide fences that are 6 feet high. They're easier to maintain and less expensive. If there was a identified need to make it higher for security, we would certainly consider that.
And I would anticipate that this is not going to be a really heavily traveled area, and if it turns into a problem, it could be dealt with. But if anything, I was looking at the less abusive screening, such as vegetation. But what I'm hearing from Council Filio and yourself, apparently the chain link is important to keep folks off your property.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Committee, anything further? Public? Okay, motion. Where? Coming forward. Thank you, back there.
Richard Bergeron, 564 Marlborough Street.
Hello.
I'm right down tight, down the end where everything tightens up. Technically, my property line is probably, my bedroom window is 20 feet from the delineation markers that are there now, that have been flagged. And there's always an element of people that you do not want near your property walking through your property, loose dogs, and everything and so forth that comes with it. And that's my concern. I'd like the chain link fence with the slats. 8 feet, 6 feet, I don't care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Aren't you happy there's no train?
I would rather have the train. Then I can ride it to work.
Thank you. Yes.
City Chair, Don Lister, City Engineer. I don't think I heard the team mention it, but something that we talked about internally at least is the fencing that we're recommending and proposing isn't going to be needed in all areas the same. At the western end of that corridor, near Eastern Ave, the rail trail is actually well below the elevation of the surrounding homes. And there's almost like a berm of earth between the folks on the pathway and the homes, where to the point where you can't actually see the residents nearby. At the eastern end, where Mr. Bergeron lives, absolutely the rail bed is basically at the same elevation as his house, and there the fencing would be needed. So we're looking to kind of determine where that fencing is needed to provide the security and the privacy that people pretty clearly expressed that they want. So,
Thank you. Anything further from public or committee? Seeing none. Yep.
Move to recommend city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to implement the proposed action as presented for the Transportation Heritage Trail Phase 1 project.
Second.
Seconded by Council Madison. And when this motion comes to council, can you have it delineated what these 4 bullets are? Be helpful. Anything further from the public or committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our final presentation, Thompson Road. And I will tell the Thompson Road folks that are here, if we do this again, you won't be last on the agenda. Thank you for enduring with us.
do you have it as a PowerPoint? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. No, not a PowerPoint. PDF. Yeah, you're gonna have to use PDF. This computer program doesn't have PowerPoint. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucio, City Engineer. With me tonight is Steve Lonnie from John Turner Consulting. He's our consultant doing the design work and planning for this project. Just by way of a little bit of background, this project has been in the works now for a couple of years. It first came forward with a request from the residents, the concern that they raised about the stability of the roadway. And we looked at it, we made some recommendations at the time that, this is a concern, but it can go into the CIP and be programmed through the normal channels. And then about a year later, we were back to tell you that the deterioration of the road had accelerated and it was ongoing, and that we actually were recommending at that point that we move the project up. So we're at the point now where we have designs pretty well ready to go. We want to show you those plans tonight, and I know that the folks from this neighborhood are wanted to talk about what we're building, and hopefully that will be that. Steve.
All right. I am Steve Lonnie. I'm the Vice President of Engineering with John Turner Consulting, and I'm the lead engineer on this project. How's that? Is that better? Okay. Thank you. I'm the lead engineer for John Turner Consulting, working with the city to bring this project together. So as Don just said, our involvement started with some concerns with ground loss on one side of the roadway. The photograph that you see on the left-hand side, the photographer is standing on the north side of the road looking south. Where you see the concrete berms or barriers on the left-hand side. Those were installed by the city in response to some ground loss. The photo on the right-hand side is just a zoomed-in version of that same area. You can see some movement of the guardrail, which was compromised by the ground loss on the roadway. Those traffic barriers, the concrete barriers, would put in place to reestablish a safe travel lane and to restrict traffic from going off to the side of the road. Actually, in that same, in the lower right of that photograph on the right-hand side, you'll see after the initial placement of those concrete barriers, there was still some further ground loss. You could see a little bit of unevenness in those barriers, and the city again came through and put some bituminous concrete berm in there to help direct stormwater runoff that was going off to the side of the road, keep that from going on and causing more erosion. Here, this photograph on the right, again, looking south from the north end of the roadway, just wanted to illustrate there's a pretty significant slope upward on the west side of the road, which becomes a little significant as we got into the design of the project. So I just wanted to show that. And then the last photograph here on the right-hand side is now standing on the south side of the road, looking back up north up the road with the area of ground loss now on the right-hand side or the east side of the roadway. So that just kind of orient you to the project and why we're here and how we got here. So as part of our design process, we did a geotechnical investigation that included soil borings within the roadway, drilled down deep to kind of identify the soils and do some strength assessment of those soils. We also did some test pits using an excavator off to the side to get a little, get an idea of more superficial soils near the surface. We did some topographic survey as well as had an engineer walk the slope and assess the condition of the slides or the ground loss on the east side. So from that, what we concluded was that there was no reason to believe that that portion of the roadway was any more unstable than any other portion of the slope. What we identified as the primary cause of the ground loss there was grading in the roadway, allowing stormwater runoff to come down the road and dump off the edge of the pavement into the slope. And that water eventually caused some erosion on the surface of the slope. And then once erosion starts, the whole slope becomes more susceptible to erosion, and it's kind of like a snowball effect, and it just got worse and worse. Overall, there's been roughly about 160 feet of roadway affected by that erosion. Again, that is the primary driver for the project, and then as we got into the design, we implemented a few other things which should help improve the roadway overall. Maybe I should zoom in on this one. So what this depicts, this is a kind of a generic section view from our design drawings. Again, this would be looking with your back north and looking south down the roadway. Again, the primary issue within that 160-foot range of roadway is that loss of ground on the east side. The way we're going to handle that is we're going to excavate out any kind of loose soils, get into soils that we think haven't been affected, nice stable ground, and reestablish that grade using a high-strength crushed rock riprap. That material will allow us to reestablish the grades and put the guardrails back to generally the original alignment. Again, what we determined is the primary reason that this happened in the first place was stormwater runoff from the roadway. So we worked with the city to come up with a plan to regrade the roadway so that it pitches back to the west, so from left to right across the screen. So any stormwater that runs off from adjacent properties or further on up the hill or on the roadway, instead of now running down the road and dumping down the downslope, it will now be directed toward the opposite side of the street. And in order to collect and handle that properly and avoid any kind of other issues down the road, we'll be implementing some new drainage structures and piping on the west side. So that will keep the stormwater from just kind of running uncontrolled as it does now. As another part of the project, not the primary driver of it, but another concern here was just kind of coincidentally where that section of roadway is, it really kind of bottlenecks and it's very narrow. It's only about just over 11 feet wide at its narrowest point there. So we talked about, well, if we're going to do this, we should attempt to improve that roadway overall anyway. So we are going to push the western edge of the roadway further west into the slope that's there now, which necessitates this retaining wall that we're depicting on the right-hand side of the picture now. Just depending on the curves and the grading and exactly where we are in the roadway, the height of the wall changes, but it's 8 feet at its maximum height and then goes down to about 2 or 3 feet on its extents. I tried to, hopefully this is, I'm hoping that this can be seen on the screens here, but I tried to overlay that section onto a photograph there to give you an idea of what this might look like in the ground as you know, where that's going to be in space in the roadway. So that's about what where those measures will be implemented and how it will look in the field. So just a couple of sample photographs kind of showing what, once the riprap is in place on the east side of the roadway, this is generally kind of what it would look like. That's the kind of the final appearance, what you will see when it's all done. Likewise, I know that the retaining wall is something that be of great interest to everybody. So the retaining wall, what we decided to do here is a top-down building method that should be more cost-effective. It would prevent the need for any kind of temporary earth support to put a wall in, a more conventional wall. So the contractor will come out with a piece of equipment probably similar to what you see here with that excavator. It had a vibratory pile driving hammer attached to it, and they'll install steel beams vertically in the ground at about 8 feet spacing along the alignment of the retaining wall. Excuse me. And then once the beams are in place, they'll come through and they'll excavate soil out in front of the steel beams in lifts, maybe 2, 3, 4 feet at a time. And they'll install timber boards horizontally between those beams to help retain the earth. And that's what you see that worker doing here on the lower left-hand side photograph. When they're done excavating to grade and getting the wall to the elevations that it needs to be, it'll look similar to what you see on the lower right-hand side. And then once that is done, we apply a spray-on concrete called shotcrete to the face of the wall. For all intents and purposes, once it's applied and cured, it's concrete. It's just like conventional concrete that we're all used to. It's just the application process is different. Instead of pouring it into forms like in conventional construction, it's pneumatically sprayed on the wall and then finished in place on the exterior side. This photograph here is a soldier pile wall with a shotcrete facing. This is very similar to what we're proposing here as the retaining wall here. This looks very much like what we expect the finished wall here on Thompson Road to look like. One of the concerns here obviously is we have homes at the top of the hill in between Marlborough Street and where this work has to go. So we did figure out a phasing plan to keep drive-up access both for the residents and for emergency services. So the project will be conducted in phases, split east and west. We'll do that with concrete barriers down, essentially down the center of the roadway, and traffic lights, both top and bottom, that are synced together so that traffic only goes one way at a time. So roughly speaking, this is a very elementary depiction of what, that might look like in the field here in the lower left, barriers down the center with a traffic light on top. That's roughly what the residents and folks will see while they're out there. The plan on the top right, I'll make this a little larger here. So we're looking at this with the top of the page is essentially west, where the homes are, and the bottom of the page is east, down slope. So the first phase is going to be that western side. That's really driven primarily by getting more space on the job. Like we said, it's very bottlenecked in this area. So if we can push the open area, the accessible area further to the west by installing that retaining wall, that gives the contractor more room to work. So the green line on the top depicts roughly where the tree clearing, brush clearing extents would be. The red line is approximately the retaining wall, and then the blue lines represent that first phase edge of pavement in there. And then you can see, we modeled in here a couple of passenger vehicles. You can see where the flow of traffic would be able to go through between the phase line and the edge of pavement. And then once phase one is done, which is the bulk of the work, is the retaining wall, the drainage installation, the excavation that kind of pushes the roadway west. Once that's done, they'll open up the west side for traffic, and the east side will be done, which will be primarily the slope restoration and then pavement restoration. The last slide we have here is just a kind of a list of items that have to be done to get the job done. We worked with some local contractors to get some budget estimates, put together an engineer's estimate pre-bid, and with contingency, we're sitting around an estimate of about $1.1 million to construct the project.
Well, one question for you. This concrete retaining wall, can we get a texture? Can it be carved such, it looks like stone, bricks, something other than just a...
It is possible to do that. I mean, there's cost implications to it. The simplest, most cost-effective way to do it is just a smooth trowel finish like you showed here, but there's multiple different ways of doing it. I've seen contractors, do initially that trowel finish, and then while it's still not quite hardened, you can go back and you flash it a little bit, and it gives almost like a popcorn ceiling type of appearance on the outside. That's possible. It can be carved to look like brick or rock or something. Those carving techniques tend to drive the price up quite a bit, but it is possible.
I'd like a little more information.
Okay.
So if you could look into it. This is going to be there for a long time.
Question?
Yeah.
Just a quick question. You had mentioned that during construction, you'd have a divider down the middle of the road. I assume that's after you excavate to one side, because as it is right now, there's barely one lane anyhow. And I'm just concerned about if emergency vehicles do need to access the property. So when you lay down that barrier, I assume it's going to be asked you...
It's more centered to the finished road, not the current road.
Okay.
Right. So it'll be almost all the way to the west of the existing road, right?
During construction.
During
You know,
construction of phase
during
one.
construction, obviously, right now, if you start construction right now, the road is extremely narrow as it is. how are you going to accommodate traffic during the beginning of construction for residents?
So there will be a 9-foot travel lane on the east side, and then the contractor will be able to access from both the north and south sides to come in and excavate and provide his own space to build his construction area, put the retaining wall in and build his construction area going west.
Okay, thank you.
They're basically gonna have to carve out room to work.
Right, that's my
Yeah.
basic
Right,
question.
exactly.
Yes, Andrew.
Thank you.
No, sir.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the stormwater structures. One of the concerns I have is about capacity, because as you know, we've been seeing an increased frequency in heavy storms, in flood events. And my concern I have is with the pretty steep gradient on this road, we're going to see a lot of velocity towards the lower reaches of Thompson Road and where it reaches 101. So I'm kind of curious what the stormwater structures will look like, what the outfall will look like, and what will be done to kind of prevent erosion on this new wall on the west side.
So, I don't think Steve mentioned it, but included in the design, 2 or 3 feet from the face of the wall is a granite curb. So we're creating basically a curb and gutter on the uphill side of the roadway. So the water will collect along that curb line and get intercepted by your traditional, typical stormwater catch basins periodically down the length. And I forget, I think there's 5 or 6 along the length.
I think it's close to, I think it's 7 or 8.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So, you know, every couple hundred feet, there's a catch basin along the way to get the water down into the pipes. And that water continues in the pipes until it discharges parallel to and near Route 101, very, very close to the Branch River.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Counselor?
And there is we have an outfall designed in there to prevent erosion at the exit, at the discharge point.
Thank you.
Public questions, comments? Please, come on up.
Hi, Pat Walker on Council Road. I'm on the west side. Totally confused. We've set the flags up several times because the first time we did, the first time you couldn't tell whether a 12-year-old put the flags up or who put them up. They were that diagonal mixed up. He did come up this week and change them. But with this diagram, we really couldn't see it back there to judge what you were doing. I would like to know whether we could set up another meeting and be more detailed for us to be able to see everything. You know what you're talking about. We don't always understand it, at least I don't. So I think we need to set up another meeting and have it more explanatory, and then have things that we can actually see and go over. I mean, you and I have talked before, Steve, when you first came up.
Sure.
But things have changed. We've gone through several different plans that didn't make a difference, because they've all changed again, and now they've changed again. So I don't think I don't know if they do, understand everything, but I certainly don't, since I'm the one who seems to be the person who's having all the effect to it, because we're the first house. So I need more detail. And, I understand, the 1 million, fine, but, so I would like to request to set up another meeting with more details so that we all can actually see physical what's going on. And I would love to see if you could email us all what you just showed us.
yeah, we can absolutely make that presentation available, and I'm very happy to.
Whether you do it here or in
Yeah,
Public Works, it doesn't
very
matter.
happy to sit down with you and whoever would like to join us to go over the plans and explain any questions.
And I had another question I didn't understand when we first started out, we were gonna do pilings on the riverside, the steeper side, and now we're doing riprap. And I understood that the pilings are a lot more secure to keeping the side stationary. The riprap, we've tried it before and it lasted a few years. Whether it was the wrong riprap, I don't know. So I know the cost between the riprap and the pilings is a big difference. I've gone and researched a lot of this, but some of it's confusing unless you work with it.
Right, no, I understand. So I can address that topic of it. So as we said before, we concluded that the primary driver of this ground loss on that side of the road has been erosion. So Typically, I mean, a retaining wall on that downhill side is an option. We did look at that as an alternative. But ultimately, coupled with the expansion of the roadway and needing to do a retaining wall on the west side anyhow, it really just became unnecessary to do a retaining wall on the lower side because it's not it's an erosion issue. So a retaining wall, we usually do something like that when there's a geotechnical slope stability or strength issue. We don't see any reason to believe here that there's a big global stability issue. And then, so it just became a matter of cost. So the most cost-effective solution is riprap. I'm not aware of what riprap solutions might have been done in the past, but I have seen in other cases similar to this, if you could kind of dump some riprap on the surface, essentially you're putting quality material on top of disturbed material, and that stuff underneath washes away. So
So now-
that's why we're cutting into the roadway.
So you're
and
digging
locking.
down and putting, what are you putting for riprap? What are you using?
It's a crushed rock riprap.
So it's a.
Yeah.
Size.
Yeah, so it's, and we have it as a wider section, so it kind of locks in place. So it's
Okay.
not just sitting on the surface of material that has been disturbed.
Correct.
historically.
The other question was, you're removing several trees, and of course, trees is what holds up the wall going to the river. So you're saying the riprap is gonna replace the trees support?
So there's 2 trees, I think, on the south side.
And then 3 at the corner, which I don't understand at all why we're removing.
Yeah, so the trees on the wall side are in order to get the wall in,
On what
and to make
side?
space.
On the west side? That's my
On
side.
the west side, yeah.
Yeah, I understand those trees being
Yeah,
removed.
yeah,
It's the
yeah.
ones on the east side, on the
Yeah,
river
on the
that's
east side,
concerned.
they're in the way of doing the grading and the excavating.
Not
So-
whether they're supporting anything, because I just hope the riprap is gonna be able to support
Yeah,
all of this. Then, let's see what else I had here for you. Oh, yeah, what is the height on the west side that you're putting in a wall there that's gonna have pilings as
Right.
well? It's not riprap, it's actually pilings. And what is the height of that going to be?
So it's a maximum height of about 8 feet.
So it's 8 feet.
I'm sorry, let me just clarify. That's the exposed height, what you will see above ground when it's all done. Those steel beams will extend deeper into the ground,
Because
but
we've,
those won't be.
okay, because we've only put the flags at the bottom, I have no idea. We don't have anything at the top as to where they're coming, what's gonna be removed, and in place, because you're gonna put the walls, you gotta remove trees and all that other stuff. I don't have any idea where that's all about, because it's winter time, you're not gonna be able to pull out and put things, I understand that. But I just would like a little more detail in what it's gonna affect on my property.
Okay, time out.
All right, gotcha.
I think it would be wonderful if the 3 of you actually had a meeting.
Sure, me too.
And, if the city manager can arrange such for the neighbors, maybe have it at the Blastos room or, someplace that's convenient, or someone's living room, so that you're all comfortable with what's going on. There's a lot of specifics that you're asking
I
that
know.
you have the answers, you just have to communicate it.
Okay, then let me talk to the rest of the neighbors. Hold on.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so, through the city manager, you'll set up
Yeah,
something?
absolutely.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but there's just so many specifics that you need answers. Yes.
Good evening. Jessica Pieranunzi, 67 Thompson Road. I'm at the top of the hill. I guess the biggest questions from our concern is that I do have young children that we go up and down the road to school and activities many times a day. What do you anticipate as the longer end of interruption for when the phases that are, the big digging out projects, what do you anticipate for actual shutdown? I know that you've said there's a light, which is mostly going to be fine because you're going to communicate all of that, but just out of curiosity.
On the long end, we expect about 6 months. That would be
Oh, no, I just mean like in terms of a day or two or hours at a time that we can't
Like if
access.
they've got to block it. So the general rule is going to be that the contractor has to maintain one lane of traffic during the duration of the project. I will say that there may be occasions, but it would be, 1 or 2 days when they're setting up the traffic barriers, for example, where they may not be able to get anybody by for a couple of hours. But they're, and we made it clear in the contract documents that they are expected to maintain one line of traffic throughout. And it was raised earlier about, emergency services. I do anticipate, once those barriers are set up, we will have our friends at the fire department come up to look at it and make sure that they're comfortable providing emergency
I
access.
can guarantee that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Ball from Thompson Road. Don, you were up the other day and put some poles in.
Yep.
You didn't put them on the other side that I saw.
I did not, because those stakes were put in to delineate where the retaining wall is going to be.
Yeah,
There's no retaining wall on the other side.
no, but I just want an idea of where the road's gonna go. We know on this
Okay.
side.
Yep.
We don't know on the other side.
Okay, we can mark it up.
And also, everybody realizes there's water lines running up through there, right?
Correct.
And I'm still concerned near the bottom, where you can't see around the corner. I'd like to see a little more of that land chunked off, so you can see up the hill.
Yeah. And there will be some of that corner removed, but at the same time, we don't want to, steal any of Pat's land, so we can't cut too much.
I don't think it'd take too much.
Yeah, yeah, and it will be brought back to where the retaining wall is marked. It'll be improved, let's put it that way.
Okay. Because I know where the cement blocks are, I mean, that drops right off here. I don't know how you're gonna put stone in there.
Yeah, and this has been a source of some confusion with the riprap concept. And, admittedly, Public Works in the past has, as Steve put it, dumped riprap over the embankment as a way of trying to control the erosion. Really, what we're talking about is a similar material, but a completely different solution. What we're proposing is to excavate out about 6 feet down of roadway, about 8 feet wide, remove all of that soil and replace it with a quantity of riprap that's interlocked and bedded properly. So it's not just a superficial layer of material, it's a massive material that we're putting in.
I don't know if any of you have gone up the road or not. If you did, you'd see what we're talking about. Hey, thank you.
Anyone else like to address the committee or grill the consultant?
That's why he gets paid the big bucks.
I know, but, well, you're here to answer questions and speculation, so that's good. And you and the city manager will arrange a walk around up there, or
Absolutely.
whatever's good for the neighbors to get answers. We are paying attention. And again, it's my promise, this will be back on the agenda for an update, and I won't subject you to 2 hours of everything else in the city. So anything from the committee? Who's up for motion?
Down here.
Down where? Oh, you again, second.
It's me again.
Ooh.
Move to recommend that the PowerPoint presentation, Project Update Thompson Road Construction Project be accepted as informational.
Second.
Motion's made, seconded by Council Filio. Anything from the committee? Public? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, and thank you, Chair. Just one, I don't know if I should acknowledge that I got a text message from the mayor, but I did, requesting that with the trail project, that lighting at the parking area be considered. Easy one. Got it. Okay, all that being said, I thank the public that came, the staff that was here, and the committee, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
What time did you guess? It's 8:15. What time did you say? You said 8:20, didn't you?
No, I said